This documentary seeks to tell the civil society organization's journey in preparation for the third cycle review of Uganda amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and a shift to hybrid implementation of activities.
Uganda is committed to reporting on the status of implementation of all these recommendations at the third peer review. In some cases, our acceptance would contravene some of the provisions of our Constitution, the supreme law of Uganda, as well as the relevant national laws currently in place.
The Universal Periodic Review is a human rights mechanism under the United Nations. It was created by a United Nations General Assembly resolution establishing what we call the Human Rights Council. So this mechanism allows member states to peer review each other on how far they've gone in fulfilling their human rights obligations within their own countries.
The ultimate aim of this mechanism is to help improve on the human rights situation in all countries and address any human rights concerns through technical assistance and cooperation.
So as the then UN Human Rights Committee was changed into UN Human Rights Council, the UPR was formed to complement efforts by treaty bodies in reviewing efforts by state parties to the UN Charter as regard human rights, promotion and protection. So a particularity of the UPR is that while the traditional treaty bodies will only deal with thematics under their docket, the UPR embraces all human rights. For example, the human rights, the treaty body that works on torture will only deal with torture. But when it comes to UPR, it deals with all ranges of human rights, ranging from civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights. All human rights are dealt with when it comes to comprehensively when it comes to UPR. And also one particularity is that treaty bodies are composed of experts, but UPR is composed of peers. So UPR is a peer review. So representatives from states will review other states, while in the treaty body it is experts that review the effort by the state. So the role of civil society is extremely important because they are key actors in the promotion and protection of human rights, locally speaking, in each country.
The story of UPR in 2016 was two-way. One, we were grappling with continuity because we had just begun it in 2011 at a low note. But then two, we're also grappling with responsiveness because issues had emerged in 2011 that required civil society in Uganda to make a response. At that time, the lead institution was Human Rights Network, and we created the National Stakeholders Forum for the UPR. So we went ahead, continued with the goodwill that had been created in 2011, but shared with the three more powerful or very, very close partners. That is the government of Uganda, Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, and then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. At that time, it was Ambassador Etiquette who was the man behind the Wheels of Steel. And then we also had the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and of course the entire civil society. So in 2016, we expanded the National Stakeholders Forum from just 3 coalitions, and we shot up to almost 16 coalitions, clusters that were supposed to do the different kind of reporting.
The previous UPR cycle is a very healthy development because it helps to inform government of the human rights gaps that could be existing in the government, and the recommendations that we should do.
The Uganda Human Rights Commission plays a critical role in promotion and protection of human rights. Over time, we have built mutual collaboration, and here are views from the Director of Monitoring and Inspections on her experience with the 2016 UPR cycle and insights on the 2022 cycle.
This directorate is the one in charge of providing an oversight role on the human rights situation in the country. It's the directorate that is responsible to ensure that government gives accountability of the human rights compliance, and also ensure that there is compliance of human rights standards by all ministries, departments, and agencies. Through this directorate, we are able to reach out with stakeholders to discuss issues of human rights, to look at issues of accountability, to ensure that there is government compliance. We review bills before Parliament. We advise government on what should be done with regard to different human rights, in this context, different thematic areas. I have been involved in the UPR processes, and previously, and still this one, we have been involved in advising government on the preparation of the state report, which is distributed or submitted to Geneva for review. And we also write an institutional independent report. You can call it an alternative report or an independent report, which we equally submit. The world sees us to be a closed-up space where no one can speak to a situation in that country. The UPR process broadens and opens the state up, whereby other states can speak to how you're dealing with your citizens. And I think that is very important, because then the states are not only accountable to their people, but they know that there is another platform or forum where they can be questioned and they are required to respond. Now that creates accountability, and that's very important. My other experience is the partnership and coordination amongst human rights defenders, where you find the commission coming together with civil society, community-based organizations, and we deal and address a variety of human rights thematic areas at one go. So we're dealing with water, we're dealing with the environment, business and human rights, women, children, political rights, issues of torture, issues of liberty. You are talking about business and human rights, climate change. You are dealing with education and health. And for once, you deal with human rights in totality. Unlike in other mechanisms, when you are dealing specifically for water, then you're dealing specifically for just torture, then it's about women, then it's about persons with disabilities. But the UPR is unique in that we get to address and talk about and discuss human rights in totality as a country. So that is why I really love this process. And I think it is a good mechanism, and it has been welcomed by many states, including Uganda. And we're anxiously waiting for 27th January, when we are going to be reviewed, and later on the 1st of Feb, to see what the government adopts and what it rejects. So we're anxiously waiting for this process.
As a coordinating entity of the Civil Society Third Cycle UPR process, the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, in collaboration with the Steering Committee, reconstituted the forum. Since October 2020 to date, 423 organizations at national and subnational level have been engaged to generate consensus and input in the Civil Society Stakeholder Report. Differently this year, this cycle, Ugandan CSOs were able to submit 22 thematic reports. Voices from the ground.
The journey has been remarkably well. Most importantly, how I've been thrilled and excited how Coalition has managed to pull the membership, the engagement, the agility of the Coalition has been remarkable, especially given the challenges of the corona crisis that came in. Without mimicking the mic or something like that, I would say Coalition has become the most active platform in the country. Under the UPR arena, whether we think we have been heard as a national or a grassroots youth initiative? The answer is yes. We have not only been heard, we have also been engaged. We've been supported. We feel we belong. That's the most important. We had that sense of belonging from the beginning up to now. We have been through together in this journey. So that's also the uniqueness of the coalition, because oftentimes a lot of intervention, whether it was always having that national lens approaches, it always stopped around the city. Most of the intervention you hear, it's about city, about Kampala, but a lot of things are happening outside Kampala. And I think that's really an area that coalition has successfully handled it very well, that being extremely inclusive, taking the information to people, but also bringing people to the platform where opportunities are.
I believe issues of women's rights were ably discussed, and they have a place. They definitely have a place in this particular report of the third cycle. I want to mention that when you hear the phrase women's rights, you need to bear at the back of your mind that it also includes girls. The two are inseparable. So the full phrase would be women and girls' rights. But when we say women, we also mean girls. Now, the cluster, the UPR dedicated a whole cluster to capture issues related to women's rights. So that was the platform, that was the space where women were able to discuss what affects them, were able to discuss progress made in the last 4.5 years since the last review, provide information on challenges, but most importantly, make recommendations for the way forward. And when you have a female representation, a female leadership, you can be very sure that a report is going to provide insights around women's rights.
It is my first time to engage with the UPR process, and my experience has been good because I have gained experience in how different thematic working groups come together to input towards the UPR process. And we are thankful to the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Network that brought us together virtually, the HRDs and civil society in the Albertine region, where we have the extractive industry taking place, and we have issues around human rights that are originating from the extractive transparency developments that are taking place, and we are able to do submissions to the process, which we hope that they will be taken up in the review and given final conclusions.
The UPR process before, we actually didn't have the sexual minorities cluster, but this time it was actually put in, because before we were falling under marginalized, I think, and ethnic groups, but now there was a whole cluster for sexual minorities, which was the cluster heads were HIRAF and SMAG. So it actually gave us something to actually now front our issues, and the report was made by HIRAF that was submitted to the National Coalition for Human Rights Defenders.
The Universal Periodic Review at the moment.
From my engagement with the United Nations Human Rights Council, it's important for civil society organizations to be very well prepared in their advocacy. Have your facts ready. Additionally, if possible, you can also have fact sheets, summarize information on what the situation is on the ground, and most importantly, what you expect the Human Rights Council to do.
Every region should look at these issues coming out of recommendation from UPR processes as an area of implementation. Rather, take it up into advocacy. We've done coordination enough. We've done a lot of consultation meeting enough. We have spoken our mind. We need action now. And the type of action must give opportunity to the grassroots person, to the person whose right has been violated, to feel the fact that there is response.
I have hope that most of the recommendations that we've set will be implemented by the government, but also we want to collaborate with the government and see that we put a mechanism that can track that implementation. We have had engagements, and we think that if this mechanism is in place, we can even track the progress, we can track the process and see how and gauge how much we have gone.
The Universal Periodic Review and beyond.
It's a good process because what it recommends improves on the overall performance of the institution. At the same time, improving on the observance of human rights, and the ultimate beneficiary are the citizens.
One of the key ingredients is to count on the strength of the local community, the community-based organizations. People in the community have got the experience that we don't know, we don't have. If we limit the human rights issues to be a paper-based, intellectual, good text, good policies, good tools, then we are not making sense. I think how Uganda's UPR arrangement has been coordinated, the clustering of the UPR in Uganda has been so successful that almost all categories of human needs are catered for, from health to education to transitional justice to all these kind of things, even livelihood. Poverty, as we know, is the worst form of injustice, and if we forget about the voices that is needed to empower, it's not about GDP, it's about livelihood. I think UPR approach, our approach should be about answering the livelihood questions. Unless people can have a sustainable livelihood, GDP means nothing.
I think that moving forward, we don't need to wait for recommendation in the next phase of UPR to begin having feedback and follow-up. We already know that some of these recommendations are given based on the context analysis of the region in Uganda in terms of what is critical for the people in the area. So for my own region, I would say that some of the recommendation requires implementation, whether it is taken up to Geneva or not.
I would like to appreciate the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders for one, for trusting WONET and our sisters Nau and FIDA to lead the women's rights cluster. We do not take that for granted. I would also like to thank the coalition for supporting us through that process. It is highly technical, it is highly demanding, but it was up to you not to ask for the support that you needed. It was there.
I think the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders is playing a very important role by virtue of the fact that they are united and they form an umbrella, and they also spearhead the participation of civil society. They coordinate the participation of civil society in the process. So I think it's a coalition that has to be strengthened, and we need to work so that they receive the necessary resources to implement their mandate. And as we speak, I think some of them will be preparing now to travel to Geneva. There are certain issues that are even resolved easily when government, civil society, UN and others meet in Geneva than they are able to do it when they are all here together. Because when you are there, it's a different ambience, a different atmosphere. So I think the coalition should be strengthened, should be supported so that they are able to even achieve better.
Government has responded on the progress that they have taken in regard to the previous recommendations. Now, there are other areas where there are gaps. I expect that the incompleted responses or incompleted implementation of recommendations can be completed. I expect improved rule of law, democracy and good governance. I expect a respect for human rights in our country. I expect that perpetrators will be held accountable. I expect that there will be more recognition and respect of human rights in our country. My hopes are high, and I hope that they are not dashed. But I have high expectations that come February 1st, the state will up their game and improve on the situation of human rights in Uganda in all aspects. and that they owe a duty not only to the people, but to the people that to the other states where they commit to do certain things. But most importantly, they owe us a duty as Ugandans to do particular things for us, particularly in regard to the respect and protection of the rights of Ugandans.
Our UPR journey can best be considered a successful one to this point, and would like to express our appreciation first to the steering committee composed of civil society organizations, the grassroots human rights defenders that participated in this process, the different national and international actors that has provided technical expertise, financial support, and of course the Secretariat of the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders that have put in a lot of effort to ensure that this exercise is all-inclusive, participatory, and interactive.
The views and opinions expressed in this documentary are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda, United States Agency for International Development USAID, Uganda Civil Society Strengthening Activity, and East-West Management Institute. The Civil Society Organization's UPR journey is brought to you by the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda with support from East-West Management Institute under the USAID-funded USAID Uganda Civil Society Strengthening Activity.